The cans went into the cart in the dark before the city woke, when the only sound on Delcourt Avenue was the soft rattle of aluminum against the wire mesh and the wheels catching every crack in the sidewalk. Renee Talley had a route. She had walked it for so long that her feet knew it without her thinking, past the shuttered laundromat, behind the corner market where the night manager left the recycling bin unlocked for her, down the alley where the rain pooled and a person could lose a shoe if they were not careful. She did not look up much. It counted. A nickel a can in this state. And she counted in nickels, because nickels were honest. Because nickels added up to a number she had carried in her chest for 2 years, and that number was the price of a violin. She had no idea on that grey morning that a man she had never met was about to hear her daughter play, and that everything she had bent her back for, in the dark, was about to be seen. The violin cost $400. Not a great violin, not a concert instrument, just a student model in a shop on the east side with a hand-lettered tag in the window and a body the colour of dark honey. Renee had stood at that window with her daughter, the first time almost by accident, waiting out a downpour with nowhere else to stand, and she had watched the girl go still. Maya was 9 then. Poor. She pressed her small hand to the glass and did not say she wanted it. She never said she wanted things, because she had learned at an age no child should learn it, that wanting things made her mother's face go tight and quiet. She just looked, and Renee, standing behind her with rain dripping off the hood of a coat she had owned for 6 winters, understood that she was going to find a way. $400 at a nickel a can that was 8,000 cans. She did the math standing in the rain, and the number did not frighten her the way it should have. Because Renee had stopped being frightened by large numbers a long time ago. She was frightened by small ones. The $11 left in her account after rent, the 2 days until payday, the single egg in the carton on a Thursday morning. Big numbers were just small numbers. You had not finished yet. She worked days cleaning rooms at a motel off the interstate, the kind of place where people did not stay because they wanted to, and the work was hard on her hands and harder on her knees, and it paid what such work pays, which was never enough. There were 16 rooms to a shift and a cart with one bad wheel that pulled left, and a supervisor named Dwayne who timed the rooms with a watch and clipped a nickel off your hours if you ran long, and Renee had learned to strip a bed and remake it in under 4 minutes, learned the chemical smell of the cleaner so deep into her hands that it followed her home, learned to find money under the cushions and turn it in at the desk every time, even when no one was watching, because Renee did not take what was not hers, not a dollar, not a coin, not the small bottles of shampoo the other women pocketed by the handful. Dwayne thought she was slow because she did it right. He did not know she went out after the shift and bent over a recycling bin in the dark. He did not know anything about her, and that was how she preferred it. The cans were the rest. The cans were what she did when the shift was over and Maya was doing homework at the neighbors. The cans were the thing nobody knew about, the secret economy of a woman who had decided that her daughter would have one beautiful thing in a life that had given her mostly the opposite. She kept the money in a coffee can on the top shelf of the closet behind the folded winter blankets, and once a week she counted it into paper rolls, nickels in rolls of 40, $2 a roll. She would lay them out on the kitchen table when Maya was asleep and stack them like small grey bricks, and some nights the stack was higher than other nights, and on the high nights she let herself feel something close to hope. She did not tell Maya. That was the whole point. The violin was going to be a door that opened where the child did not expect a door, and Renee had been building that door 1 nickel at a time. Maya did not know about the cans. What Maya knew was the cardboard. 6 months into the saving, Renee had come home to find that her daughter had cut the side off a shipping box and drawn a violin on it, the shape of it, the folds, the strings ruled in with a marker and a borrowed ruler. 4 strings exactly, spaced the way she must have studied them through the shop window, and the girl was sitting on the floor with a wooden spoon under her chin, moving a chopstick across the flat cardboard and making no sound at all, and looking for all the world like she was hearing something. Her eyes were closed. Her small fingers pressed down on places where there was nothing to press, finding notes in the empty board, and her whole face had gone soft and far away into a music only she could hear. Renee stood in the doorway with her keys in her hand and watched her daughter play a violin made of trash, and she did not cry because she had trained herself not to cry in front of the child. She went into the bathroom and ran the water and cried there. With the fan on the way, she did everything that was hers alone, sitting on the closed lid of the toilet with a towel pressed to her face so the sound would not carry. And when she came out, her eyes were dry and she told Maya the cardboard one sounded beautiful. And Maya said, "I know," and went back to playing the silence. That cardboard violin went everywhere after that. To the neighbors, to the laundromat, under Maya's arm on the bus, and people smiled at it, the way people smile at a child's. Pretend, kindly, and without understanding. And Maya held it with both hands like it was worth $400, because to her it already was. She named it, she called it the brown one, because she had decided the real one in the window was the brown one, and the cardboard was just the brown one until the brown one came home. Renee heard her whisper to it once. "Soon," the girl said, "soon." There was a woman 2 doors down named Gloria, who watched Maya in the evenings and asked no questions and took no money, an old woman with a bad hip and a kind face who had buried a husband and outlived most of what she loved, and Gloria was the only person on earth who knew about the coffee can. She knew because she had seen Renee counting through the window one night and had come over with 2 cups of weak coffee and sat down at the table and counted with her. And after that it was a thing the 2 of them did, a quiet conspiracy. Gloria would slip a handful of her own cans into Renee's cart sometimes, pretending she had just forgotten to throw them out, and Renee let her keep the fiction because Gloria needed to be part of it, and there was little enough in this world that an old woman with a bad hip could still give. 2 years is a long time to want one thing. There were setbacks. The winter, the furnace in the building died, and the landlord took 3 weeks to fix it, and Renee spent 40 of her can dollars on a space heater, so Maya would not be cold. $40, 800 cans, gone in an afternoon at the hardware store, and she had stood in the aisle doing the arithmetic of her own sacrifice and bought the heater anyway, because a cold child is a cold child, and a violin is a violin, and you do not let the second one freeze the first. She remembered the weight of the box in her arms and the walk home, the way the cold came through her coat, the way Maya had said she was not even cold, "Mama, you didn't have to," while her lips were going pale, and Renee had plugged it in beside the girl's bed and sat on the floor with her back against the mattress until the room turned warm. And only then had she let herself think about the 800 cans, and she had thought about them once, fully, for exactly the length of 1 cup of cold coffee, and then she had folded the thought up and put it away. There was the month Maya got sick, a fever that would not break, and the clinic visit that cost what a clinic visit costs, and the medicine that cost more, and the can money went. All of it that time. The coffee can scraped down to a layer of nickels at the bottom that did not even cover the curve of the tin, and Renee started again from almost nothing, and did not let herself feel the weight of starting again because feeling it would have stopped her. She walked the route the next morning before the fever sweat was even dry on the sheets, and the cans went into the cart, and the number began again at the bottom, and started slowly, in the dark, to climb. You have known a person like this. Maybe you have been one. Stay with her, because the world is about to find out what she did in the dark. By the second autumn, the coffee can was almost full. Rennie had counted it so many times she knew the number without counting. $391 and change, $9 short, $9 and a few cents. 2 more weeks of the route, maybe less if the recycling behind the market was good. She had started to let herself imagine the day. She imagined walking Maya to the shop. She imagined the man behind the counter, taking the brown one down from the window. She imagined her daughter's face, and the imagining was so sweet and so close now that she walked the route those last weeks almost lightly, almost the way a young woman walks, and the cans went into the cart in the dark, and the number climbed those last $9 toward 400. Then the shop window was empty. She walked Maya past it on a Saturday, the way she had 100 times the small ritual of looking, and the violin was gone. Just a square of cleaner glass where it had hung, and a price tag turned face down on the velvet. Maya stopped on the sidewalk and did not say anything. She was 11 now. She had stopped pressing her hand to the glass a while back, because 11 is old enough to understand a window, and she stood very still and looked at the empty place where the brown one had been, and then she looked up at her mother with an expression Renee would carry for the rest of her life. Danny expression that was trying very hard not to be disappointed, that was working to arrange itself into something that would not make her mother's face go tight, and the child said, "It's okay. We didn't have it yet anyway. It's okay." Renee went into the shop alone the following Monday on her lunch break, walking the 8 blocks because the bus fare was canned money now, and she asked the man behind the counter about the violin in the window, the brown one, the student model, and he told her it had sold. A man had come in and bought it for his nephew, paid cash, took it that afternoon. He saw her face, and he was not unkind. He told her he could order another, the same model. It would take a few weeks, and Renee said yes, please, and she walked the 8 blocks back to the motel and clocked in 2 minutes late and took Dwayne's clipped nickels without a word and cleaned 11 rooms. She did not let her hands shake until she was alone in the last one. Room 14, stripping a bed someone had left in a state, and even then she only let them shake for a minute, standing with a fistful of sheets pressed to her chest in a room that smelled of strangers. And then she finished the bed and squared the corners and wiped the mirror and moved on, because there was nothing else to do but move on. A few weeks. She had waited 2 years. She could wait a few weeks. She told Maya nothing about the empty window or the man who had bought the brown one for his nephew. She let the girl believe what 11-year-olds believe, that some things are just gone, and she carried the secret of the new one ordered and coming the way. She carried everything, folded up small, and held close to the bone. The new one came in on a Wednesday. The shop called the motel because Renee had no phone of her own anymore, and the message got passed through the front desk, and Renee took it folded in her apron pocket all afternoon, like it was the deed to a house. That evening she counted the coffee can one last time onto the kitchen table. $402. $2 over $2 she would let the man keep or spend on rosin, and she rolled the last of the nickels, and she did not tell Maya anything except, "Put your shoes on, we're going for a walk." They walked to the shop in the blue end of the evening. Rennie did not say where they were going, and Maya did not ask, because Maya had learned that some walks are just walks, and some walks are something else, and you do not spoil the something else by naming it too soon. The man had the case open on the counter when they came in. The brown one. Honey dark, the strings catching the shop light, a small block of rosin and a spare set of strings tucked into the case, and the man looked at the girl and said, "I hear this one's been waiting for you." And Maya did not understand at first. She looked at the violin and she looked at her mother, and the understanding came up through her, slowly like water, filling a glass, and when it reached the top, she pressed both hands to her mouth, the way her mother did, the same gesture passed down without a word, and she did not shout. She whispered, "Is it the brown one?" And Renee said, "It's the brown one, baby. It's yours." She did not gloat over those 2 years. She did not tell the man behind the counter about the cans, about the dark mornings, about the heater and the medicine and the starting again. She paid him in rolled nickels and quarters and crumpled ones, $400 exactly and 2 more, and the man counted it without a word and put it in the register and shook Maya's hand like she was a customer of standing. And the 3 of them stood in the small bright shop for a moment that none of them would have been able to explain to anyone who had not been there. Maya played the brown one every day after that. She had no teacher. There was no money for a teacher. That was a different mountain, and Renee had not started climbing it yet. But the girl had taught herself more on cardboard than anyone would have believed possible. The placement of the fingers, the bones of the songs she heard through Gloria's wall from Gloria's old radio. And now with real strings under real fingers, the sound that came out was rough and thin and out of tune and absolutely alive. She practiced in the stairwell of the building because the acoustics were better and because she did not want to bother the neighbors, though the neighbors, it turned out, did not mind. Old Mr. Abney on the 3rd floor started leaving his door open. The family on 2 said the baby slept better with the music. Gloria propped a kitchen chair in the second-floor landing and sat there in the evenings with her bad hip and her hands folded and listened with her eyes closed. And once, a delivery man stopped on the stairs with a box on his shoulder and stood for a whole song before he remembered where he was going. The stairwell of that tired building filled up in the evenings with the sound of a child teaching herself to play, the scales climbing and faltering and climbing again. The same 8 bars worked over and over until they came clean, and the building, which had not had much to be proud of in a long while, was a little bit proud. Renee would come home from the motel with the cleaner still on her hands and hear the music coming down the stairs before she reached the door, and she would stand on the landing below and listen to her daughter before the girl knew she was home, and those minutes on the stairs in the dim light with the music falling down to her were the richest minutes Renee had ever owned. There was a farmer's market on Saturdays in the lot behind the old fire station, a small one, a dozen stalls, and Maya asked one Saturday if she could bring the brown one and play, just play, not for money, and Renee said yes, because she could not think of a reason to say no that was not really just fear. And the girl set up near the corner where the bread stall met the flour buckets, and she opened the case and she played. People slowed down. Not many at first. A woman buying tomatoes stopped and listened to a whole song. A man with a dog sat on the curb. Maya did not look up at them. She played the way she had always played, with her whole self gone into it. The cardboard girl who had finally been given the brown one and the open violin case sat in front of her with nothing in it because she had not put it there for money, but people began to drop money into it anyway. $1 here, some coins, because that is what people do when something true happens in front of them. It was on the 4th Saturday that the man stopped. He was not from the neighborhood. You could see that in the cut of his coat and the careful, quiet way he held himself. A tall man 60 or close to it, with close-trimmed grey hair and a stillness about him that made the air around him seem to slow down. He had been walking through the market the way a man walks when he is killing an afternoon he does not know what to do with, and he had heard the violin from 2 stalls away, and he had stopped. He stood at the edge of the small crowd and he listened to Maya play, and his face, which had been the closed, careful face of a man with somewhere private to be, began to change. He listened to her play a piece she had taught herself off the radio, the bones of it right and the rest of it homemade, and when she finished, he did not clap with the others. He just looked at her for a long moment. Then he came forward and he crouched down, slow, with the carefulness of a man whose knees were not what they were, until he was at her level, and he asked her name. Maya, the girl said. He asked how long she had been playing. About 2 years, she said, but only a few weeks on a real one. He asked what she had played on before that, and the girl, who had no reason to be ashamed and was not, said, "Cardboard. I made one out of a box." His face did something then that Renee, watching from the flour buckets with her heart in her throat, could not read. Something that moved through the man like a current, and he stood up slowly, and he turned, and he found Renee in the crowd as if he had known exactly where she was standing, and he walked over to her and he said, "Your daughter has something I have spent my whole life around and almost never heard. Where did she learn?" "She taught herself," Renee said. "We didn't have a teacher." The man was quiet. He looked back at Maya, who had already started another song, lost in it, oblivious to the conversation that was about to change her life. And then he told Renee who he was. He had spent 40 years playing in orchestras, the kind of rooms most people only see in pictures, halls in cities across the ocean, a chair near the front of the section where the sound gathers and lifts, and he had retired 2 years ago when his wife got sick, and he had buried her in the spring, and he had not been able to listen to music since. Not one note. The records stayed in their sleeves, the radio stayed off. He had taken the instrument he had played his whole life and zipped it into its case and slid it under the bed where he did not have to look at it, because the thing that had been his whole life had become the thing he could not bear. Every note of it shaped like the woman who was no longer in the chair across the room listening. He had been walking through a farmer's market on a Saturday with nothing inside him at all, killing an afternoon he did not know how to be alive inside of, when he heard a child playing a song wrong in all the right ways, and for the first time since the funeral he had wanted to hear the next note. "I did not think I would feel that." Again, he said, "And your girl gave it back to me, with a $400 violin and no teacher." He was not a man who cried easily. You could see that. But his eyes were wet at the edges and he did not hide it. He asked Renee if he could teach Maya. Not for money. He said the word money the way a person says a word that has lost all meaning to them. He had more of it than he would ever spend, and none of it had filled the hole his wife left. And here was a thing, finally, that he wanted to do. He wanted to teach the girl who played wrong in all the right ways. He wanted to give her the things he knew. He said, "I have been looking for a reason for 2 years. I think I just found her at a bread stall." Renee did not say yes right away because Renee did not trust easy things, because nothing in her life had ever come without a hook in it, and she stood there in the flower bucket light and searched the man's face for the catch. And the man who had spent 40 years reading rooms understood exactly what she was doing, and he did not rush her. He gave her his name and the name of the hall he had played in, and he told her to look him up, to ask anyone, to take her time. He said he would be at the market next Saturday and the Saturday after that, and if she never came, he would understand, but he hoped she would come. Then he crouched down again by Maya, and he listened to her finish her song, and when she finished, he said, "You held that last note a half-second too long, and it was the most beautiful thing I have heard in 2 years." And both of those are true. Maya laughed. It was the first time the man had heard her speak above a whisper. That night, Renee could not sleep. She lay in the dark and she listened to Maya, breathing in the next bed, and she thought about the cans. 2 years of cans for a $400 violin, and the violin had brought a man who wanted to give her daughter the one thing Renee could never have bought at any price, not in a lifetime of dark mornings, the thing that was not for sale on the East Side or anywhere else. She had been saving for an instrument. She had not known she was saving for a teacher. She had not known that the door she was building 1 nickel at a time opened onto a room she could not even see. She did look him up. She asked Gloria, who knew everything about everyone, and Gloria's eyes went wide, and she put her hand on Renee's arm, and she said his name back to her like a prayer, because Gloria had a record of his somewhere, an old one. And that night, the 2 women sat in Gloria's small apartment and listened to a young version of the man play through a crackling speaker. Gloria had to dig the record out of a milk crate under the window, blowing the dust off the sleeve, her hands not quite steady, and she set the needle down with the care of a woman handling something holy. The same man, 40 years younger, filled the small room, the sound thin through the old speaker and grand underneath it anyway. A man at the height of his powers playing in a hall an ocean away, while 2 women in a tired building listened in the lamplight and tried to fit the thought of him into the thought of the gentle stranger who came twice a week to teach a poor child for free. "He had played for kings," Gloria whispered, reading the back of the sleeve. "He had played for kings, and now he was coming to my apartment to teach our Maya how to hold a bow." Gloria cried, and Renee did not, but it was close. They went back to the market the next Saturday. The man was there. He had brought music, real sheet music, and a folding stand, and he sat up next to Maya at the corner by the bread stall as if they'd been doing it for years, and he started, gently, with the smallest thing, the way you hold your hand, the way the bow is not gripped but balanced. "Hold it like a bird," he told her, "tight enough that it cannot fly away, loose enough that you do not crush it." And Maya tried, and dropped it, and tried again, and the third time her hand found the balance, and her face changed, and the man nodded once like a door clicking shut on something. Maya, who had taught herself everything the hard way, drank it in like a person who had been thirsty her whole life and had not let herself know it. She made him show her things twice, and then never needed a third. The lessons moved to Gloria's apartment when the weather turned, because Gloria had the only space and was glad past speaking to have a child making music in her rooms again. She would make a pot of the weak coffee and set out 3 cups and a plate of whatever she had, and she would sit in the corner with her bad hip propped on a stool and listen, and sometimes the old woman fell asleep in the warm room with the music going, and no one woke her. The man came twice a week. He never took $1. When Renee tried, once, to give him something, a plate of food, the only currency she had, he took it and ate it at Gloria's table with the fork held in a hand that had played in the great halls of the world, and he told her it was the best meal he had eaten since his wife died, and Renee understood that the giving went both ways now. that this lonely man was not doing charity, that he needed Maya as much as Maya needed him, that the ledger of it was even. Maya got better fast. The man said he had taught at conservatories and never seen anyone take to it the way she did, and he did not say it to flatter the child because he was not a man who flattered. He said it the way a man states a plain fact about the weather. By spring she could play whole pieces clean through. By summer the rough, thin, alive sound had become something with shape and control. Still alive, but now it could go where she pointed it. The man started bringing other things. A better bow, which he said he had lying around, though Renee suspected he did not have such things lying around. A shoulder rest. A metronome. And then, one evening in Gloria's apartment with the window open and the street sounds coming up warm, he told Renee about a school. It was a conservatory program for young people, a real one, the kind that did not take many and changed the lives of the ones it took. There were auditions in the fall. The man thought Maya was ready or would be, and he wanted to prepare her for it. And he wanted Renee to know that the program was free for the students who got in, fully funded, and that he would handle everything else. The application, the travel, the things a family without money could not handle, because he had money and no one to spend it on, and this was, he said, the closest thing to a purpose he had felt since he stopped playing. Renee sat with that, a free school, a future for her daughter that she could not have imagined 2 years ago, counting nickels in the dark, and she asked the man the only question that mattered to her, the question of a mother who had been disappointed too many times to leap. She asked, "What if she doesn't get in?" And the man, who understood her by now, said, "Then she will have spent a year learning from me, and she will be a girl who plays beautifully, and that is not nothing, that is everything, and we will find the next door." He did not promise her the world, that was how she knew to trust him. The people who had hurt her had always promised the world. The audition was in October in a hall across the city that Renee had only ever seen from the outside of a bus. They took the train, the three of them, Renee and Maya and the man, and Gloria too, who had bought a new dress for the occasion and held her purse in her lap the whole way like she was guarding it. Maya wore a dress Renee had pressed twice, and the brown one was in its case on her knees, the same $400 student violin, because Maya had refused every offer of a finer instrument. The man had offered to lend her a violin worth more than the building they lived in, and Maya had said, "No, I want the brown one, my mother bought me the brown one." And the man had not argued, because some things a man who understands music understands all the way down. She played the brown one in that hall. Renee sat in a hard seat in a row of parents who had paid for years of lessons, parents in good coats, parents who checked their watches and murmured the names of teachers to one another. And she held Gloria's hand, and she watched her daughter walk out onto a stage under lights and lift a violin bought with 8,000 cans to her chin. And she did not breathe. The girl looked small out there, smaller than she had ever looked in the stairwell, a slip of a child in a twice-pressed dress in a hall built to hold 1,000 people, and for one terrible moment, Renee was sure it had all been a mistake, that they did not belong in this building, that someone would come and quietly turn them out. Then Maya set the bow to the string. Maya played. The cardboard girl, the stairwell girl, the girl who had taught herself the bones of songs through an old woman's wall, played in a real hall, on a real stage, and the sound that came out was not rough anymore and not thin anymore, but it was still, somehow, alive, more alive than the polished children who had played before her. Alive in a way that money cannot buy and only need can teach. The judges at their long tables stopped writing. One of them set down her pen. And when Maya finished and lowered the bow, there was a silence in that hall before the applause, the particular silence of people who have just heard something true, the same silence the tomato woman and the man with the dog had made at the farmer's market, and Renee knew that silence now, she had heard it before, it was the sound of the world finally seeing. Maya got in. The letter came 3 weeks later, and Renee read it standing in the kitchen where she had counted 10,000 nickels, and she sat down in the chair where she had stacked them in small grey bricks, and she put her face in her hands, and finally, with her daughter accepted, and her future opening, and the long dark labour of 2 years come all the way home, Renee Talley cried where someone could see her. Maya put her arms around her mother's neck. The brown one was, in its case, by the door. Gloria, who had come over the moment she heard, stood in the doorway with both hands pressed to her mouth. The man was there for all of it. He drove Maya to the school those first weeks, until she learned the trains, waiting in his car at the curb each afternoon, with the engine off and a thermos of coffee, and he kept teaching her on the weekends, and he became, over the years, something the family did not quite have a word for, more than a teacher, a fixed star in their small sky. He sat at their table on holidays. He kept a photograph of Maya at her first recital on the shelf where his wife's picture stood, the two frames side by side. And he told Renee once that his wife would have loved a girl, would have spoiled her terribly, would have filled the house with her on the days the house was emptiest. He told Renee near the end of a long evening that people thought he had given the girl a great gift and that they had it backward, that a man can have everything and still be empty, and that an empty man had walked into a farmer's market on the worst Saturday of his life, and a poor child with a cheap violin had handed him back the only thing he wanted, which was a reason. The cans, he said, you saved for 2 years and you thought you were buying a violin. You were buying my life back. Neither of us knew it. He laughed softly and looked at his hands. The world keeps a stranger ledger than we think. Years later, when Maya played in halls Renee could not have dreamed of, in cities Renee had only seen on maps, she always kept the brown one. She had finer instruments by then, given and earned, but the brown one rode in the front seat, in its case, the $400 student violin with the body the color of dark honey, and on the nights before the big performances, she would take it out and play something small and homemade on it, the way she used to in the stairwell. And, somewhere, a mother who no longer counted nickels, who slept in a house with heat that worked and a phone of her own, and a daughter whose name was printed in programs, would hear about it and smile. And on the shelf in that house, where the coffee can used to sit behind the winter blankets, Renee kept the cardboard violin. The brown one, the first brown one, the side of a shipping box with the F holes drawn in marker and the strings ruled in with a borrowed ruler, soft now at the edges from being carried so many places by a child who believed. She never threw it away. Some evenings she took it down and held it in her lap, the wooden spoon still tucked inside it, and she thought about all the mornings in the dark and the rattle of cans and a number she had carried in her chest, and she understood that she had been right all along, that big numbers are only small numbers you have not finished yet, and that a person who keeps going in the dark is building a door, and you never know, till it opens, what room is waiting on the other side. Have you ever done a quiet, faithful thing for someone you love, a thing nobody saw, and watched it come back to you transformed beyond anything you imagined? Tell me about it. And if this story stayed with you, there is another one waiting. About a janitor who swept the same floor for 30 years and what was found in his locker the day he retired, and I think you will want to hear it.